this video, Amy Park describes how her 2010 Governor General Award-winning history project aligns with the 8 principles of the Galileo Discipline-Based Inquiry rubric.
My teaching experience began in rural Alberta, and my understanding of teaching was that students would sit and I would teach and they would learn. As a result, my students were completely disengaged and bored, and I knew that there had to be a better way of interacting with my students and getting them excited about learning. Actually, I was in my 4th year of teaching when I had the opportunity to change schools and go on a secondment to the Calgary Science School. While there, I had the opportunity to be mentored by the Galileo Educational Network. And it was through this mentorship that I began to understand and uncover for myself what it meant to design learning for students that would excite them, engage them, and lead them to deep understanding of whatever discipline we were working in. I was introduced at that point to the discipline-based inquiry rubric, which has 8 dimensions. And it's through this lens and this framework and rubric that I was able to reflect on my practice, reflect on the work that I was presenting to students, and design worthwhile, authentic tasks that were true to the discipline versus fun activities that are sometimes seductive and get teachers and students excited about fun work, but there's no deep learning in it. It was the very first project that I did with students where I finally had my own aha moment, where I realized this has potential, and the kids are excited, and they were engaged, and they were taking up the work beyond classroom time, and they wanted to stay in at lunch. They were in that flow zone, which I hadn't seen before in students, and so it clicked something for me, and it also clicked something for them, and I knew at that point there was no turning back. In the grade 2 curriculum, one of the topics in social studies focuses on the Inuit people. The sort of traditional approach might be to have students read some books and answer some questions and maybe do some fun craft-like activities. I wanted more for my students, and I knew that they wanted more as well. In order to deepen their understanding about the Inuit, about their role in Canada, and about being Canadian, I wanted to put them into the role of becoming archaeologists and museum curators, essentially. The goal was to have them create a virtual museum where they would share their understanding of the Inuit culture through looking at an authentic Inuit artifact. In terms of authenticity, which is the first dimension of the discipline-based inquiry rubric, students were invited into the inquiry by being placed in the role of being an archaeologist, of uncovering the truth behind, or the perceived truth behind, an artifact, and to discover what is the story that's within this artifact, what it was about the Inuit culture that has changed, and how they live in today's world. To set the stage for that, we took them to the Glenbow Museum, where they took part in 2 different programs. One was becoming a curator, and the other one was artifact storytelling. And that sort of set the stage for their understanding of what it is that those people do in their day-to-day world. Academic rigor is essentially the product of an inquiry is not necessarily a movie or a PowerPoint. The product of a well-designed inquiry is deep understanding. In order to get students to that level of deep understanding about whatever it is that they're undertaking, requires that the task have rigor. And rigor not in the sense that it's painful and should be an arduous task, but rigor in the sense that students are expected to go deeper than just having a superficial understanding of the topic. So this required that students did research, connected with experts, that they really had a strong understanding of what it was that they were learning, and then also to make key connections to today, to their own lives, to previous learning and to new learning. The next component of a well-designed task focuses around assessment. And in my mind, assessment and task design go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Assessment not only informs the teacher about where students are at in their learning, it also tells teachers what their next teaching step needs to be based on what it is that the students are coming to understand or what their misconceptions are. Assessment needs to be ongoing from the onset. It demands that student voice be an integral part of the assessment process. So that requires that teachers provide exemplars, both strong professional type exemplars and really poor exemplars, so that students have a clear understanding of the different criteria for each level of their understanding or of the product or whatever it is that you will be assessing. When the assessment piece is at the forefront and students understand it from the get-go, then you have created a space where students are constantly striving to improve their work. It requires that the rubric is not just created at the beginning and then handed back out at the end. It's revisited throughout the process over and over again. Students are getting ongoing feedback in order to improve their work. It's not a one-shot deal. It's nothing in life is a one-shot deal. Very few things in life are a one-shot deal, and learning isn't one of them. Another dimension of the discipline-based inquiry rubric focuses on elaborated communication. Communication in today's world is an essential competency that students need to develop their understanding throughout their experience as a learner and into adulthood. It's nothing that's going to go away. Forms of communication have changed over time, but the need to be able to communicate orally, visually, in text is pervasive in our culture. Students need to be able to express their understanding in a variety of ways to a variety of people. In the Inuit project, students were invited to share their work with other groups throughout the entire thing. They were asked to share their work with parents. They also had to, because it was a video, they were able to share it with a broader audience once we had published it and put it online.
People wondered if they could make a blazing fire to keep them toasty warm. They tried rubbing sticks together quickly, but that didn't work.
Next, they tried banging rocks, but nothing happened. Finally, Moshi found their dad's flour drill, and the kids tried to use it, but didn't know how. They rubbed it for a long time, and suddenly some sparks and a flame appeared. Pippa cried very excitedly, "We finally did it!"
Beyond the school, in terms of inquiry, demands that students not necessarily take their work outside of the classroom, but that they have the opportunity to develop competencies that high performance work environments, very dynamic work environments require. The projects or the tasks that we ask students to do need to help foster and develop those key competencies. For example, in the Inuit project, students were becoming historical thinkers. They were making connections between different cultures in Canada. They were developing empathy. They were problem solvers and collaborators and communicators within the context of the work that they were doing. We were able to develop further through different projects. In terms of the Inuit project and beyond the school, as soon as the videos had been fully put together, we posted those online and shared them with our parent community and the greater community. We also were able to share it with other classrooms. We had the grade 1 classroom come in and watch our stories. We had the other grade 2 classroom come in and watch our videos. Connecting with expertise is an important component of the discipline-based inquiry rubric. It's more than simply finding an expert who will come into the classroom, give a talk, and then leave. It's about tapping into what it is that the people within the discipline actually do. What are their day-to-day tasks? What are the processes they go through in order to come to an understanding about something new? How do they share knowledge? How do they connect with other people? It's not necessarily bringing someone in, but it's tapping into that expertise. So although we didn't have a museum curator come into our classroom, we did go to the Galileo Museum, and we were able to build off that knowledge, and students took on those same processes that experts do within that field in order to sort of uncover the mystery behind their artifacts. So we were mirroring the work that they were actually doing. Expertise can also come in the form of the exemplars you choose to share with your students, so that becomes their goal, is to create these junior versions of whatever expert exemplar you're bringing into the classroom. Regardless of your own personal expertise, you have to have an understanding of where the topic lies in the real world. If you're looking at doing historical documentaries with your students, for example, I wasn't an expert. However, I connected with people who were. And I also did my own research. I did my own inquiry into what is really important about this and what is it that I want students to understand and be able to do with the information that they gather. So as teachers, I think it's our responsibility to know we don't need to know everything, and I don't need to know all the technology, but I need to know who I can access and how I can also tap into the expertise within the room. Because so often we forget that actually students come to class with a rich background, in some cases not, in a variety of areas. And so I don't need to know how all the technology works, because chances are, if I give the kids a few key tips, they will be able to take it further than I ever imagined. And then they become the experts, and other students can tap into their expertise. No longer can we be asking students to simply memorize facts and dates. We need students to be actively learning, actively creating and developing new understanding that they can share with the world. It requires that students are hands-on, doing something with what it is that they're learning, no longer just passively consuming information. In the Inuit project, students engage with true, authentic artifacts that we had borrowed from the museum. And it was through that literally active exploration, that they were hooked, because they truly believed that they were, in fact, archaeologists, and they were uncovering the mystery behind these artifacts. That was something very tangible for them to ground the work in. So technology is pervasive in our culture today. Alberta Education has invested a lot of money in ensuring that there's access to technology in schools. The issue becomes, how do we use it appropriately? How do we use it to enhance and engage students in learning that is richer or deeper than what would be possible otherwise? It's about how do we use the technology to enhance student understanding, and how do we use it to make the work more compelling for our students, for the audience. It requires intentional planning on the teacher's behalf. It can't be an afterthought. It needs to be built into the process of the design. Because the final product of the inquiry into the Inuit was going to be a documentary, it demanded that we used technology in a variety of ways. And because now technology is accessible and available, students are capable of creating very sophisticated pieces of work that otherwise wouldn't be possible. There's something very compelling about students sharing their understanding in a digital format, hearing their voices, listening to what they have to say. You don't often capture that on a piece of paper. And so I think in this task, students were invited to not only tell a narrative story, but also a nonfiction piece of the Inuit culture. And that has been captured digitally and can be revisited over and over again. And it makes the learning more enduring.
It's very sad the Inuit lost their original ways of living, because once a culture changes, it can't go back to the traditional way.